Hello, I'm Nido Qubein. Welcome to Conversations with North Carolina's most influential leaders, appearing on the Power List presented by Business North Carolina. Mike Fox, welcome to this program. I have been wanting to talk to you for a long time. You are the chair of the Department of Transportation Board in Raleigh, North Carolina. We've had some incredible achievements in our state this year. You're also the CEO of the Piedmont Triad Partnership in the Greensboro, High Point, Winston-Salem area, and all the counties around that, the Carolina Core, I believe you call it. So I'm intrigued to talk with you about why North Carolina all of a sudden is so attractive to everybody.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here on your beautiful campus and for doing this interview. I would answer that question by saying the rest of the world is finding out what we've known here in North Carolina for a long time. It's a great place to locate your business. It's a great place to raise your family. It is a great place to vacation. And so we've finally gotten the word out, and we've got an incredible business climate as well as a lot of advantages in infrastructure. And not just roads, bridges, and rail, but also electricity, water, sewer, all of those things make it attractive for a business to come here.
What is the DOT obviously strategizes with a future view of our state and the growth of our state? What do you talk about on the boards? You talk about where we need more highways. I'll give an example of what I'm asking. In Wilmington, North Carolina, all of a sudden Wilmington has erupted as a very active and attractive place. And I noticed that they are building all kinds of roads over there to accommodate this tremendous increase in traffic. You see it in Charlotte, you see it in so many places. Let us in a little bit on what DOT talks about when you have these meetings.
Absolutely. Well, our board is a policy board. And so we're looking at setting the policies for our state to continue to thrive. And we're looking a decade out. If we're thinking about what's happening today, then we've missed the boat. And so we're focused on a couple of things. One is, what are the projects that will be needed in the next decade, and how do we get those built? Equally important is there's going to be a huge change in how we fund transportation and infrastructure over the next decade, because our traditional source is a motor fuels tax, which you pay every time you put gasoline in your vehicle at the pump.
That's not the sole source.
No, but it's about 65%.
Is it really?
It is.
And the other comes from?
From various fees. When you buy a new car, there's a fee, or when you renew your tag, there's a fee.
So no income taxes go towards roads?
There's very little general fund money that goes into the transportation fund. The only general fund money is that when you pay a tax on transportation related things, like if you get your car repaired, and that tax now goes towards transportation.
And what is that number annually?
Our budget is about $6 billion annually.
$6 billion. That's an annual budget?
Yes.
That is money that is expended annually?
Roughly. It goes up and down depending upon the collection of the tax, as well as we get probably about a third of our funding from the federal government. And sometimes that money is more or less depending on grants we receive.
Mm-hmm. This is maybe a hard question for you to answer, but how much of that money is actually spent with North Carolina vendors, suppliers, contractors?
A fair amount, because even if the company that gets a bid on a highway contract, for example.
So everything is bid?
Yes.
Bid out?
Yes. Even if that company is from out of state, they will end up using a lot of North Carolina labor, contractors, goods. They'll be staying here, so a lot of that money is spent in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. And what about rail? We've been talking about rail for a long time, Mike. Where are we with rail? Are we going to see it in our lifetime?
Well, we're very fortunate in North Carolina in that we have a great rail system. Back in the 1850s, the leaders of our state were insightful enough to create something called the North Carolina Railroad. And that is a 300-mile corridor from Charlotte to Morehead City that is owned by the state, that we can really use for economic development purposes as well as passenger rail.
I guess I'm talking more about, what do you call it, high-speed?
High-speed rail.
High-speed rail.
Yes. There's actually, with the Infrastructure Act that was recently passed bipartisan by Congress and signed by the president, there's a lot of federal money going toward rail and improving the infrastructure. And notably to North Carolina, there are two things that happened, one in North Carolina, one in Virginia, that are key. The one in North Carolina is the S-Line, which will create a new line really from Richmond directly to Raleigh along an old track. The other one is money was appropriated to repair a bridge across the Potomac River in D.C., which is a bottleneck for the entire East Coast.
But I remember, I don't recall his name now, but he was the president of Wake Forest University, and he either chaired a committee or he was highly involved in promoting the notion of high-speed rail. And we were talking about how do we connect Raleigh to the Triad, to Charlotte, in nano time. That project is progressing, or is it on the back shelf?
No, it's being actively pursued, and part of what you've got to do to get high-speed rail is to eliminate what we call at-grade crossings, where cars or trucks physically cross the tracks to get across the tracks. We'd much rather there be a bridge or a tunnel, because every time you have an opportunity for a car and a train to interact, it's a bad opportunity. And so we've been working steadily for the last decade to reduce those at-grade crossings, which will allow the trains to go faster. We've also spent money sort of straightening some curves. In many places along the North Carolina Railroad line, the track is in the same configuration it was in 1850 when trains didn't go as fast, so they can't take the curves as fast.
What's unique about you is that you have been so involved with DOT for a long time, since 2017, on the board and then chair of the board thereafter, appointed by the governor of North Carolina. And then recently became the chief executive officer of Piedmont Ride Partnership, which has been incredibly active in bringing mega businesses like Toyota Battery, like Supersonic. I noticed the other day a big announcement at PTI, Piedmont Ride International Airport, where another company coming, spending a lot of money there. So this is interesting that you do both of those. You're a lawyer by trade. Where did you go to law school?
I went to law school at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
And you still practice some law?
I do.
Yes, and you're married to a judge.
Yes, although I try not to practice law in front of her.
Well, I don't know, she might be nice to you. Depends what arguments you had at home that morning.
That's right.
So Mike, what is it all of a sudden that makes North Carolina so dynamically attractive? I mean, we all remember Florida killing every state, everybody moving down to Florida. COVID helped in a big way in Florida. And now Florida is having some challenges with transportation. You go down Palm Beach, West Palm Beach, there's a rail that literally runs through West Palm Beach. Traffic is horrendous. I mentioned Wilmington, North Carolina, traffic is very heavy. So all of a sudden we've become very attractive. Tell me why North Carolina has become now attractive. I understand beach and mountains and roads and all the things that you cited, but I think some legislative activity may have also helped some of this.
Absolutely. We have a great business climate. The legislature and a number of governors have worked hard to make sure that this is a business-friendly place. Our tax rate is relatively low. We've also got the reputation of being a very supportive community for business in terms of if you decide to locate your business here, we're going to do everything we can to try to make you successful, and that goes from not only providing traditional infrastructure like roads, water, sewer, electricity, natural gas, but also employees and workforce. And I think workforce is one of our greatest strengths. We have a growing population. We're one of the 4 fastest growing states in the country.
What are we now, 11 million or so?
We're roughly 11 million.
11 million.
And we continue to have people move here every day, even from places like Florida, which is another fast-growing state.
A lot of Florida people have places up in the mountains of North Carolina, for example.
Exactly. And so, and importantly, particularly in this region, in the Carolina Core, we have a growing working age workforce. So it's not just people who are retiring.
Is that because of community colleges and education institutions? And why is that? Why do we have more workforce in this Carolina Core?
Well, I think we have a history of manufacturing here. And going back to the textile companies, the tobacco companies, furniture, et cetera. So we have a culture of manufacturing where it's viewed as a positive job. And of course, we've transitioned now from textile, furniture, and tobacco to advanced manufacturing. And of course, we have an automotive battery plant, we have an automotive plant, we have a number of other high-tech industries. Thomas built buses here in High Point, and we're a transportation and logistics hub, and all those things are attractive to businesses.
Honda airplanes.
Honda Jet.
Yeah, Honda Jet and all the rest. Tell me this, in North Carolina, we're attractive for lots of reasons. Climate is a big part of it too. People like, they don't want to go all the way down to Florida, they don't want to go north, they like the climate. Are we ready for a future that is with a continuum of growth? At what point does our growth, I'm thinking about Toyota battery, I'm thinking about supersonic, I'm thinking about Honda Jet in this region. If we keep getting some of those, is it going to strain us in some ways, whether it's on the highways, whether it's on workforce availability, what else? I don't know. Transportation vis-a-vis airports. Charlotte has a very active airport. Look what happened to Charlotte.
Right.
To a great extent because of the airport. Do you agree with me on that?
I do, and I think your question is a great one, and the answer is we have to plan for that.
Yeah.
We have to be thinking ahead for the next decade, not only in basic infrastructure, but also workforce development and education. I think our educational system here in North Carolina is one of the most attractive things that people look at from every level, from pre-K up through higher education and our community colleges. We have a world-class system, and then we have private universities that are world-class as well.
Talk to me about incentives, Mike. I remember on a number of occasions where we lost some mega corporate opportunities because other states provide incentives that were greater than what we were providing as a state. Where are we with that? Where's the mood for that in the legislature? Where is the mood for that in local governments that have to also step up? How do you see it?
I think we in North Carolina, both at the local and the state level, have come to a good place where we realize that that is the way of the world. You have to participate, but you have to participate in a smart way such that there's some guardrails in that if something happens and something happens with the company, you have a way to either recover your investment or you end up with an asset. If you may end up with a great building, for example. And I think that's prudent. That's a prudent use of the taxpayer money. It is undoubted that these investments, when a Toyota comes and invests $3 billion, that is a ripple effect throughout the entire community. And so there's no doubt that whatever money they are granted in incentives is paid back many times to our citizens and to our local government in taxes.
Is there a standard formula that is followed when incentives are calculated, or does it change based on size and location?
It does. It changes. There's a pretty elaborate formula that depends on what growth tier you're in.
How many employees?
What the investment is.
Taxes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And most local governments have their own policies that follow a very similar pattern.
And there's support for that across the aisle in legislature?
It is. It's been very bipartisan in that leaders on both sides have recognized it's what you have to do to be in the game and be considered. I don't think North Carolina is viewed as a state that is throwing money around, but if you have a serious investment, we'll help you get there.
And let's talk about PTP for a moment here. The Carolina Core, which extends from where to where?
So it roughly follows the US 421 corridor from Winston-Salem down to Fayetteville. And
why exactly that geographic definition?
It's roughly the geographic area between the Charlotte metro region and the RTP metro region. We're the middle, in essence, and those two areas have seen extraordinary growth over the last 20 years, and there's been good growth in the Carolina core, but only recently have we really caught up to be that third economic engine of North Carolina.
So what are the similar bodies to PTP, let's say in Mecklenburg County, let's say in the Triangle area, what are they called?
Well, you have a number of different groups, primarily focused around the chambers of commerce, and there's a group right in RTP, that promotes that area, but there's really not a larger group for the entire region.
So what makes PTP unusual?
I think the number one thing that distinguishes PTP is it is really it's a private nonprofit, and it is funded entirely by its investors, who tend to be business leaders in the Carolina core area, who've really stepped up to say, we need to find a way to promote this region. And PTP is really the regional voice for the Carolina core. It doesn't take the place of the chambers of commerce or the local economic developers. It supplements and augments them.
I heard about a music initiative in Greensboro that's gotten a lot of acclaim, and that the promoters of which have indicated that that is a significant piece to promote the region vis-a-vis quality of life and so on. What is that? How does it work? And why is that important?
Yeah, so that really is a brainchild of Bobby Long and Mark Brazel at the Wyndham. And it's in partnership with the Wyndham golf tournament event. And as they traveled, they noticed that there are certain places that are viewed as really meccas of live music. Nashville, Tennessee, for example. Austin, Texas, for example. And they got to know some musicians who said, we'd love it if there was another place where young up-and-coming artists can come and they can be booked in several venues and be enthusiastically received. And so the question was, why not the Carolina core? And so they've done a good job of booking and promoting those, and they've had some big names get behind it as well. And that's an important part of that lifestyle talent attraction, because we're all in competition for the people who could live anywhere and work anywhere, and so you want there to be a lively social scene as well.
Are you seeing some of our college graduates in the Carolina core? Some of them go to Colorado, or they go to Charlotte, or they go to some other places. Are you seeing sort of some of those people coming back to live in the Triad, in the Carolina core?
We are, and they're actually a huge target for us in terms of retention of a workforce. Even not just the folks who may be from North Carolina who chose to go to school here, but even folks from out of state, because they like it here. They chose to come spend at least 4 years of their life here. So we need to make sure they understand that not only is this a great place to get an education, but it's a great place to start your career, perhaps raise a family if that's what you'd like to do.
And what initiatives or efforts are there to create awareness about all that, to sort of bring them back?
We're going to be starting this year with the PTP a talent attraction campaign, and it's the tagline is "More in the Core," and we'll be putting the word out on that with our local partners, with the various chambers of commerce.
I saw somewhere, and you can correct me on my stats, the post-NAFTA, this region, roughly 11 county region, in the Triad region, something like 90,000 jobs were lost. And we are recovering. We're not fully recovered, perhaps now with a Toyota battery, Supersonic, and others that will be somewhat fixed, if you will. Am I right on those stats? And are we recovering, and to what extent?
You are. When we first launched the Carolina Core brand in 2017, we set a pretty audacious goal of 50,000 new jobs by 2037. So 20 years, 50,000 new jobs. Well, we're at 2022, and we're at 40,000 new jobs. So we're at 4/5 of the goal in about 5 years. So we may have to readjust our goal, but we're doing very well.
Yeah, sounds great. Mike, do you get any resistance from existing companies when you have companies like Supersonic, for example, which demands a workforce that may be a little more learned, a little more technically oriented, and so on? Do you get resistance from local companies that says, you're killing me on pay scales?
There's always that question about, if you bring a new company in and I'm having trouble filling all my jobs anyway, how's that going to impact me? But our business leaders have really understood that creating a climate, an ecosystem where people want to come here and work will benefit everybody. And for example, in the aviation industry, we're really becoming known as a hub for aviation manufacturing and development, and that really creates a desire for people to move here and do that. So it takes care of itself.
What's good for one, good for all,
It
right?
is, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely true. As you look forward in the next 5 years or so, what is it that you see for North Carolina, for Carolina Core?
Well, 2022 was a record-setting year, not only for the Carolina Core, but also for the state of North Carolina in terms of investments.
In what way?
The largest investments in state history in terms of VinFast and Wolfspeed, followed in late 2021 by Toyota, and the number of jobs announced. And believe it or not, Chris Chung, who's the chairman of the North Carolina Economic Development Partnership, he says the pipeline is even fuller in 2023 than it was in 2022. Now, how many of those jobs and projects land remains to be seen, but the interest is very strong. So we potentially could have another great year.
So what do you see as challenges for us? Just what you said, great interest, pipeline filled, the likelihood is some of those will land in North Carolina. What are the challenges that lie ahead in the short term?
Two things, I think, really. One is workforce. We've got to make sure we stay on top of.
And how do we do that, Mike? Do we invest more in community colleges? Do we do more recruiting and awareness campaigns on college campuses at large, public and private? We have, 17 public universities in North Carolina, 35 private, and something like 55 community colleges, I think I'm right. We have an incredible educational system. So how do we do that?
I don't think there's one magic bullet. I think it's a lot of different things. I think it is continuing to have the good investments that we've had in the university systems and the community colleges, and also in our primary and secondary education, because a lot of these jobs do not necessarily require a 4-year degree or even an associate's degree. So we've got to be turning out high school graduates with good basic skills. If you talk to Sean Suggs over at Toyota, he says, if you give me someone who wants to work, we'll teach them. But they do need certain basic skills, and so
mindset, attitude, desire, commitment.
Exactly,
all
and to be able to read, write, do math. So that's one thing. The second thing is we've got to continue to invest in our infrastructure. Again,
highways, bridges,
and water and sewer. We're very fortunate right now in North Carolina in that we don't have the water crises that you see in a lot of places, but we have to plan ahead to make sure that that's not a problem in 10 years as our population grows and the demand increases.
Could we get to a point where we're overpopulated?
I think we're a long way from that, but I think good planning takes care of that, and there will be some technologies that will help along the way. We'll learn to reuse water. For example, and our roadways will become more efficient with more autonomous vehicles. You'll be able to.
You believe in that?
I do. I do.
So I spoke with Steve Wozniak recently, who's the co-founder of Apple Computer, and he doesn't like them. He gave me a long list of why autonomous anything is dangerous, and so it's interesting. Look him up. He's got opinions on that. Especially when it comes to trucks and all of that. But I when you look at technology and the evolution of technology, everything is possible. Right? We've gone to the moon and back, and everything is possible.
Well, if you fly regularly, most of your flight is actually on autopilot.
Yes, autopilot.
Yeah, so we're already there in many senses. I do have one hang up about it though, and that is, as long as the standard answer for fixing anything with technology is to turn it off and turn it back on again, it makes me a little nervous.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that improves with time.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, so you're optimistic about the future of North Carolina?
I am.
And you do not see any impediments in the near future that can curtail the growth, economic growth, and therefore quality of life and familial advancement and all the rest?
I think as long as we continue focusing on this being a great business climate state and a great place to live, I think we'll continue to have that success. Our leaders for the past 2 decades have done that, and I don't see any evidence of them changing, but if we get off course, it could be a problem.
What about housing, Mike? I mean, I was talking to Erskine Bowles the other day in Charlotte, some of the initiatives they have there where housing has become unaffordable for so many people, even on a rental basis. And there's an initiative down in Charlotte, Mecklenburg County to create housing, whether it's temporary or otherwise, for people who need it and can't afford the expensive stuff. When you see inflation that we're experiencing right now, a little less than it was, but still there, housing starts begin to slow down a little bit for obvious reasons. Might we see in the Carolina core some of that, or do we have enough rural areas that can accommodate more than, let's say, a metropolitan area can?
Well, in the Carolina core, I think we have a fundamental cost advantage in that our housing prices are not as expensive as they are in Raleigh and Charlotte. So we start with that.
Once upon a time, they were not that expensive in Raleigh and Charlotte.
Right. But we've got to continue to build up our inventory, and there is, anytime you create 17,000 jobs in 1 year in an area, you're going to need more housing. And so fortunately, I think our local governments have realized that, and they are doing the things necessary to allow people to build more homes of all sorts, be it multifamily, single family, and they're allowing and putting the resources toward that because you need water and sewer for that.
Sure. And the key is affordable housing.
Exactly.
We know we can have housing, but affordable housing. When you talk about attracting young people back here and hiring more and more people and so on, that becomes an issue in terms of where they live. And one last question for you, the DOT, especially at DOT, what discussion do you have about rural North Carolina? All the challenges in the rural areas of our state, we have many, and some of them struggle with medical, for example, facilities or professionals. Some of them have, when it comes down to jobs, it's difficult. They have to drive an hour. Sometimes the transportation is not available. They can't afford a car, for example, and so on. Did you discuss any of those? I know that's not the privy of DOT necessarily, but you're informed, you know the right people. What's your point of view on that?
So we do discuss that, and we are unified in that, North Carolina will not be successful if only part of it is successful. It just can't be the urban areas. And our board is actually geographically dispersed. We have 20 members. 14 are appointed by the governor from all over the state in a different geographical area, and then 6 are appointed by the legislature geographically dispersed as well. So we have those viewpoints on our board. We have someone from the Outer Banks, we have someone from the far west, we have people from Charlotte, Raleigh, Greensboro. And so we have those discussions regularly. And to me, the key to really improving the lives of the folks in our rural areas are being able to connect them to whatever they need, whether it be education, healthcare, jobs, recreation, and good transportation helps with that. Tell you a quick story. When I first came on the board of transportation, and I live in the Greensboro area, and Rockingham County, which is just north of Greensboro, is one of the counties that I'm responsible for. A group of business leaders from Rockingham County called me and said, "We'd like to meet with you." And I said, "Sure, great." And so we met. And they said, "What we're going to tell you is going to shock you, but we're going to tell you that the most important road for Rockingham County is actually going to be built in Guilford County." and it was I-73. And they realized that that connection to the heart of the triad was going to be critical for their population to be able to get to medical care, to be able to get to jobs, to be able to travel to the airport, all of those things. And that was very insightful.
Yeah, that is insightful. I-73 goes through High Point and
It does.
from Winston-Salem. Does it come from Winston?
It does.
So, Mike, listen, thank you for your service across our state and Carolina core. I admire you as a person, and I admire your talent and skill and experience, but mostly your attitude about bringing people together to make our state truly successful for generations to come. And so thank you for doing that. Keep doing that. Best wishes to you along the highways of life. And let's hope that your optimism about our great Tar Heel state continues to be at a high level.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Qubein.